My stepdad wasn't good to my mom, and she'd cry to me about it all the time. I suggested she divorce him, and she went right ahead and told David about it. Even my daughter told me to leave you, but I'm still so good to you. David got mad and accidentally killed me. After sobbing her heart out, my mom, as my family member, decided to help David reduce his sentence. The child's gone, but we who are left have to live well. In this new life, I'm back to the day my mom married David. Mom asked me, "What do you think of your new dad?" I sneered, "You two are obviously meant to last forever." That was 2 months after I died. The court had accepted David's manslaughter case. In a cramped room, I saw a lawyer constantly reminding my mom, "You're both the only witness and the victim's family. Your attitude is crucial." Mom kept nodding, "I understand. David is my husband. I'll do everything to save him." If my soul's cries could reach my mom, I'd definitely ask her while sobbing, "He's your husband, but am I not your daughter?" But I was already dead. Nothing I said or did mattered. So I had to watch as my mom, as my family member, provided a letter forgiving David. At the same time, as the sole eyewitness, my mom cried and tarnished my reputation. That night, Sarah started it. That child's always had a temper. I couldn't control her. David didn't want to kill her, just scare her a little so she'd behave. Sarah grabbed a bat and hit David. David wanted to chop the bat, but somehow, I hovered above the crowd, feeling a chill spread through me. That day, David was drunk and was going to hit my mom. I grabbed a bat and stood in front of my mom, trying to protect her. David, crazy with rage, turned and grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. I was stabbed 3 times in the neck and chest. I was gone before reaching the hospital. I died at 16. Yet, my mom's testimony turned public opinion toward David. This is the kid's own mother. If she says it wasn't the dad's fault, it probably wasn't. David was eventually sentenced to prison time. When he was transferred to prison, my mom went to see him. In front of the reporters' cameras, my mom cried her eyes out, "David, I'm waiting for you on the outside." A reporter asked my mom, whether intentional or not, "He killed your daughter. How can you continue living with him?" Mom wiped her tears. "Sarah's gone. The living need to live well. If she has any spirit in heaven, she'd want to see me happy." Standing by, I felt a coldness I couldn't shake. At school, I was always excellent, with many opportunities to escape my original family. But for my mom, I gave them all up. I couldn't bear to leave her alone with David, so I stayed home to protect her. And this was the result. In overwhelming resentment, my soul gradually became transparent. I thought I'd just dissipate into nothingness. But when I opened my eyes again, there was a familiar face in front of me. My mom, in her wedding dress, was smiling as she applied lipstick, asking, "Sarah, do you like your new dad?" I was stunned for a long time before realizing I had been reborn. Maybe heaven pitied me and gave me a do-over. This time, I'd make the most of it and not repeat my past mistakes. Mom saw my lack of response and frowned. "Sarah, what do you mean?" In the previous life, during my mom's wedding to David, I wore a grumpy face. David had a bad reputation. During his divorce from his ex-wife, things got messy. The ex-wife documented her injuries and accused him of domestic violence. Later, David's family paid her a large sum to drop the case. So when my mom wanted to marry David, I strongly opposed it. She got mad. "Do you not want to see mom live a good life for a few days? Should I be a widow just to be a good mom, is that it?" Mom had always resented me. After my dad died, she always wanted to remarry. But having me, a drag, good men weren't willing to accept her. Mom had high standards and wouldn't go for men who didn't meet them. When your mom was younger, so many rich guys pursued her, but you were the burden. I've heard similar things countless times. This time she finally found David. His family had money, he looked good, and my mom was thrilled. "Let me tell you, Sarah, I gave birth to you, raised you, I don't owe you. Give me that attitude again, and I'll... Before she finished, I interrupted her with a smile. I think the new dad is wonderful. My mom was stunned. I was immature before. What Mom said made me realize. I smiled and said, David is perfect for you. Obviously, you two will last forever. Seeing my certainty, Mom got confused. Didn't you say before that because David hit his ex-wife, he had a violent streak? I shook my head. That must have been the ex-wife's problem. Nothing to do with David. Mom wanted to say more, but I walked over, held her hand, and said, he's your husband, and you two will be great together. He loves you so much, he'd never treat you like his ex-wife. You'll surely have a happy home. Meanwhile, I'd do whatever it took to escape this house. Mom married David. As in my previous life, she realized things weren't as rosy as she'd imagined. She'd often come crying to me about money. David acts rich, but his ex-wife cleaned him out, and he has debts. Sarah, could you help your mom out if you have any money? We're hardly affording food. In my past life, I watched my mother cry and gave her my scholarships, competition prizes, and writing fees. After returning to school, not trusting enough, I texted her, keep this money to yourself. Don't tell David. He spends rashly. For security, you need savings for yourself. Mom pretends to be on my side, but then she secretly screenshots my text and sends it to David. Look, my daughter even encourages me to stash some cash away, but I'm always honest with you. I really want to build a life with you, so you'd better treat me right. I had no idea David saw that text. After school on Friday, I went home as usual, thinking everything was normal. But the second I walked in, I got a real nasty beating from him. As he's hitting me, he's calling me a troublemaker, accusing me of trying to mess with their relationship. Mom initially acts like she's going to stop him, but then David yells, if you don't let me discipline this little brat, you can just pack up and leave with her. See if any other man will take you. Mom immediately backs off, staying silent. That night, I was alone applying medicine to my wounds, tears falling. Mom was sighing next to me. Sarah, don't blame me. If I don't stay with David, who's going to pay for your college? Who's going to help with your wedding? Too bad with David in the picture, I didn't even make it through junior year before my life was cut short. Now, Mom's come to me, complaining about being broke. I instantly start crying along with her. Mom, I was just about to ask you for money. I'm barely affording food right now. I preempt her usual line, leaving her somewhat confused. Didn't you just get a scholarship last month? I saw your name on the list. The scholarship's long gone. Friends knew I got the money, they insisted I treat them. Mom, irritated on the phone, scolded, what kind of friends are these? Seeing she wanted to say more, I quickly switched it up and asked her for cash. By the way, Mom, there's this summer camp in America. Costs about 40 grand. Mom quickly avoided the topic, dismissing it as a scam, and hung up fast, as if I was about to ask for more money. The world finally went quiet. I buckled down to study, diving into my books. In my past life, I thought getting into college would naturally get me out of this house. Now it seems, it was too late. I have to get out from this dangerous place fast. I applied for dorms at school, not going home on weekends either. Mom and David visited a few times, but I used the excuse of being busy with studies to avoid seeing them. Mom got upset and complained to relatives, Sarah's such an ingrate. I may as well not have a daughter. She even talked about having another kid with David, ideally a boy. That would be perfect in her eyes. Some relatives passed this on to me. I just pressed my lips together, didn't say a word. While she's trying for a baby, I'm trying to study hard. Both of us looking for a brighter future. Gradually, Mom and I grew distant, each focused on our own things. However, someone still let her know about the parent open day. She texted me, upset, this is such a big deal, you didn't tell us? Good thing I saw it on Lucy's Twitter. David and I are coming, meet us at the school gate. Mom and David relish attending events like parent-teacher conferences. It's simple, everyone loves praise. I'm consistently top 3 in my class and held a leadership position in the student council, my name often appearing on teachers' slides of praise. For my mom and David, who've rarely received any recognition in life, basking in the admiration of other parents is a big deal. But to me, it's just a hassle. I already can't stand Lucy. She used to love bragging about her son's top grades on Twitter. That stopped when I transferred and took the top spot. Because of that, she's been sneakily backhanded in her comments. Sarah's so accomplished, she'll definitely be a career woman. Too bad, though, her attitude's too fiery, no man's gonna marry her. And after my death, she even smeared my name, though we should remember the dead kindly. I have to be fair, this girl truly was hot-headed. I saw her argue with her parents plenty. Don't let sympathy cloud the truth. At the moment, despite having a torrent of insults ready, I had no choice but to head to the school gate. With my situation not yet secure, I didn't want to openly challenge Mom or David. With David's volatility, who knows what he might do. But, when I reached the gate, it was chaos. 2 women were fighting, angrily pulling at each other's hair. Why is the handkerchief I gave my husband on you? Explain yourself. The screaming woman was my mother. What handkerchief? I have no clue what you're on about. Get your crazy hands off me. The other woman in the tangle was Lucy. Not far off, David was standing with his arms crossed, watching the show with a detached expression. Like it had nothing to do with him. I stood among the crowd, the hustle and bustle hiding my smile. Forgot to mention. That handkerchief, I slipped it into Lucy's bag after taking it from home during the parent-teacher event setup. In the past, Lucy and Mom were neighbors, constantly at odds. Lucy's looks were average, but she had a killer figure. She's always in tight, low-cut clothes, blingy nails and jewelry all around. Mom pretended not to care, but she would secretly seethe, looking so flashy. Who's she trying to seduce? Yet she'd reassure herself quickly, David's a good man, he wouldn't go for that kind of woman. At the time I watched her, words stuck in my throat. I had actually seen Lucy and David at a supermarket. They walked side by side, each with a cart, David's eyes glued to Lucy's body. Lucy made no attempt to hide, meeting his gaze head-on with equal heat. I instantly sensed something wasn't right between them. But it was just a hunch. I never found concrete proof, even until David killed me in my last life. Once I came back, I had no interest in playing detective in their silly games. But with intuition on my side, I decided to take a gamble. And wow, I was right. While I planted the handkerchief in Lucy's bag, I assumed it wouldn't come up for a while. But running into each other at the school gate set it off. Both women, trying to keep it courteous, clashed with passive-aggressive barbs. My mom insisted on seeing Lucy's designer bag, Lucy refused, and in the scuffle, the zipper came undone. The contents spilled all over. That handkerchief was right there, plain as day. Chaos erupted immediately. My mom was pulling Lucy's hair, going at it hard, while Lucy screamed that she hadn't even seen that handkerchief. Finally, my mom yelled at Lucy, "Did you sleep with my husband?" Lucy froze for a split second. There was no way out. The handkerchief was fake, but the affair was real. Lucy quickly tried to deny it, but that brief hesitation was enough for my mom to catch on. "You witch! Seducing my husband!" My mom shouted, flailing her purse at Lucy. Someone in the crowd noticed I was there and shouted, "Stop it! The kid's here, do you really want them to see this?" That person probably meant well, but inside I just sighed. I was hoping to watch these two go at it a bit longer. Why'd they have to drag me into it now? So, reluctantly, I ran over, pretending to have just arrived. "Stop fighting. You guys, stop it." I faked some tears while loosening my ponytail, letting my hair get all messy to cover my dry eyes. In my peripheral vision, I saw David suddenly move. He was striding right over. Quickly, I took a step back, not wanting to become another victim caught in the chaos. David yanked my mom away with one hand and slapped her. "Aren't you ashamed?" he said in a cold voice. "You've humiliated our entire family." It was strange. Just moments ago, my mom was full of energy fighting with Lucy. But faced with David's slap, she was like a timid mouse cornered by a cat, covering her face and not saying a word. After a long silence, my mom finally spoke, mumbling softly, "I'm sorry." She stammered, "But that handkerchief. I handmade it for you. How did it end up with her?" "It's just a handkerchief," David shouted. "If you can sew one, why can't she?" He shot me a glance and walked away. Clearly, he had no interest in attending the parent-teacher meeting now, not after this spectacle. My mom hesitated for a couple of seconds, then turned and ran after him. I watched them from a distance, pulling and tugging at each other, and sighed inwardly. David's excuse was flimsy. Anyone could see something was going on with Lucy. Yet, even knowing this, my mom wouldn't make a scene with him. She only felt safe going after Lucy, not daring to anger David. Deep down, she still held on to the hope that he'd leave the other woman and be with her properly. Watching her, I saw the sad fate of a woman. And as a woman myself, I knew I'd never follow the same path. I was determined to get out of that house for good, so I threw myself into studying and saved money whenever I could. Aside from my school scholarship, I started writing articles for magazines on weekends. Each piece was about 8 to 10,000 words, and if accepted, I got $100 per 1,000 words. It was tough at first. I wasn't used to it, so each article took a lot of edits to meet the editor's standards. That meant every weekend, aside from homework and studying, I was writing. But David wasn't happy about it. "Sarah's a 16-year-old young lady now. At this age, shouldn't she be helping around the house? She's never home during breaks, who knows what she's up to out there." He kept pushing me to come home, but I stayed at school. Finally, enraged, David showed up at my school. He stormed into the teacher's office, questioning if I was dating. "This girl's developing early, with thoughts all over the place, always away from home. We're worried she's on the wrong path." I knew what David was thinking. In my past life, he also wanted me to come home more often and kept hinting to my mom. So she often called me, crying that she missed me, asking me to visit. But going home meant getting bossed around by David. He'd have me buy his smokes and drinks and wash his feet. If I didn't, he'd beat me with whatever was handy. Once, he tried to break into the bathroom while I was showering. Luckily, I had locked the door, but it scared me to death. Afterwards, when I confronted him about it, he just smirked. "I'm your dad. It's my house. I can go wherever I want, what about it?" Now, there's no way I'm going back to that house. David came to the school gambling on my good student reputation, thinking he'd pressure me through a teacher and I'd eventually fall in line. But I anticipated he might cause trouble at school. So I went to a teacher early on, crying with snotty tears. "My stepdad wants to peek at me while I shower, and even my mom doesn't care. That's why I applied to live at school. I'm too scared to go home. Please help me, teacher." So when David went to the teacher, she was prepared. "Sarah in a relationship? Impossible. Don't worry, I know my students, and she's all about her studies. No way is she doing what you say." The teacher explained kindly, "She stays over the weekend because she's a class leader, helping me grade papers and tutor struggling students." Sarah's dad, "I'm deeply touched by Sarah's willingness to help others, and it's only because of excellent parents like you that we have such an outstanding student." Gotta hand it to the teacher, buttering up David with praise, thanking him left and right for being supportive, and even mentioning inviting him as a speaker at graduation. David, having too much pride, didn't know what to say after getting flattered like that. In the end, he just mumbled some agreement and left. The teacher told me about it later, and I felt a huge sense of relief. Finally, I could focus on studying and earning money peacefully. But it wasn't enough. I knew my mom and David too well. They wouldn't let it go that easily. So, to keep them occupied, I decided to do something major. This Saturday is our school sports meet, so everyone will be at school. We'll be done and heading home around 4 p.m. Meanwhile, my mom always goes shopping on Saturdays, come rain or shine. So, that means only David will be home during that time, and next door at Leo's place, only Aunt Lucy will be around. It was 1 o'clock on a scorching Saturday afternoon when I finally found Leo at the school broadcast station. He was in charge of reading motivational letters. He had just finished a round of them and looked exhausted and a bit annoyed. "Leo, are you okay? Did you get heatstroke?" I asked, handing him the letters I gathered from classmates. Leo wiped his sweat. He wasn't feeling that bad, but when he heard my concern, he exaggerated his condition immediately. "Yeah, I think so," he replied, clutching his head and stomach dramatically. "I don't feel well at all, must be heatstroke." Inwardly, I chuckled. This was Leo's usual act. He loved to fake being sick to duck out of any work, be it duty days, chores, or morning exercise. Given this chance, he wouldn't pass it up. "Sarah, why don't you take over for me and read the rest of the letters?" "I'm really not feeling good," he pleaded with puppy eyes. Feigning reluctance, I replied, "But the teacher will check attendance soon. If you leave early, you'll need a leave note from the infirmary." "Please, I really don't have the energy to go to the infirmary. The teacher's pretty lax about attendance." "You can just make up an excuse," Leo begged, and finally, I agreed, albeit reluctantly. And so, I took over reading the motivational letters, my voice echoing throughout the broadcast station. I read half-heartedly, watching the large clock hanging in the center. Leo, who should have been at the field, probably reached home by then. What would he find? No one really knows what Leo saw that day, but it was enough to shock him deeply. He immediately called his dad. Yes, Leo had a father. And no, his father wasn't dead nor divorced from Lucy. He was just working far away, barely making it home a few times a year. When I first got this info from Leo, it surprised me too. My mom always referred to Lucy as a trashy widow during her rants, but turns out she wasn't a widow at all. However, I soon realized this was an opportunity. I looked up Leo's father online. He seemed very successful, with significant business rep and connections. In other words, a big shot. In my clash with David, I had almost no chance of defeating him without sacrificing myself. After all, a 16-year-old girl against a man in his 40s was a huge mismatch in terms of strength, resources, and social status. But I could leverage higher forces. And so, Leo headed home early from the sports meet and caught his mom doing something with David. Before that, he was just a shy, naive nerd, only aware that his mom fought with mine at parent meetings, but never thought deeply about it. Faced with the truth suddenly, he was overwhelmed and, despite his mom's pleas, he detailed everything to his father over the phone. Leo's dad took the next flight home. Rumor had it that he slapped Lucy in public, and things moved quickly afterward. Lucy's family moved away, and Leo transferred schools. David's once decent business started encountering obstacles everywhere. With cash flow already tight, creditors pounced, some even bringing muscle. For a while, David frequently sported bruises. Clearly, Leo's dad had spoken to his connections, planning to give David a rough time. As for me, I was just a seemingly helpful classmate who subbed for Leo at the broadcast station. Who would suspect that I, not even worthy of being an extra, orchestrated this whole drama from behind the scenes? After the storm, my world was quiet for a long time. David was tangled up in business troubles, too busy even for self-care. My mom, however, was under scrutiny. Neighbors watched eagerly to see whether she'd divorce her cheating hubby. My mom's way of responding was to clutch every neighbor, lamenting David's innocence. "My David is a good man, it's that tramp who seduced him." I realized this was probably a setup by Lucy and her husband. Leo's father likely viewed our David's promising business as a future threat, so he resorted to a honey trap. Behind closed doors, my mom complained about me to relatives. "It's Sarah's fault. Because of her, David might always resent me," which made him vulnerable to other women. She decided she needed to have a child with David soon. The plan was set, but executing it was tough. My mom was already an older woman for childbirth, and doctors advised against it. Yet she wouldn't listen, seeking treatments everywhere. While she swallowed bitter medicine, wishing for another child, I was tackling exam papers, striving for academic success. I'd wake up at 6, grab a bun, and head to the classroom to study. At night, I'd stay in the study hall till 10:30, returning to the dorm by moonlight. When you work really hard, time flies. Before I knew it, the semester was over. During finals, I topped the city with the highest total score and 2 subject firsts. It shocked everyone. My teacher called me to her office, thrilled. "You've got a spot at Peking University summer camp. There'll be tests there, and if you pass, you'll earn a 30-point bonus for independent recruitment." There were 2 spots for the camp, me, and Jason from another class. Hearing his name, I was momentarily shocked. Jason and I didn't get along since day 1 of school. The reason was simple: he'd skip class and jump the school fence, and once, he did it right in front of me when I was the duty student. Jason wasn't worried at first, skipping was easy for him. He'd jump the fence, run, and if caught, deny everything with no proof. But this time, he ran into me. Like out of nowhere, I followed him over the fence. We chased each other for 3 blocks, ending with Jason trying to dodge a stray dog, crashing into a fruit stand, and me catching him, breathless. Afterward, Jason got a warning for openly skipping class and had to read an apology at the flag-raising ceremony. Meanwhile, I got praised for doing my job, even receiving an award right after his apology. I can't forget the moment I brushed past on stage, the way Jason looked at me. "Sarah, I've remembered you," he whispered. I gave him a smile back. "I'm so amazing, lots of people remember me." Now, hearing Jason's name from my teacher, I almost couldn't believe my ears. What did he score? Jason's persona is eternally young, passionate, always not paying attention in class, always sleeping during exams. But the teacher showed me the grades, and Jason's score was just 3 points less than mine. My eyes went wide like saucers. He must have cheated, right? He definitely cheated, right? Even though I knew, with finals being state level and thoroughly checked, the chances of cheating are practically 0. Being one of the only 2 students from our school going to the summer camp, I had to exchange contact info with Jason. When his name popped up, I almost laughed. It read Soul Chaser. But in the next moment, something hit me, and I froze. In my past life, after I was killed by David, my mom testified, and everyone thought I was a bad girl. Only one ID spoke up for me often, saying, "What's wrong with the world? Why blame the victim? Do you even know her? Why slander her? She's a good girl and deserved a great life." That ID was called Soul Chaser. In the sunlight, I watched Jason walk toward me with that carefree attitude, his uniform loose, showing off his good looks. Since I received an award for excellence for catching him, Jason's always called me in that sarcastic tone. "I'm too lazy to go to the summer camp briefing. You take good notes, I'll copy yours." Jason suddenly stopped talking, hands in his pockets, bending forward to meet my eyes. "Are you crying? Is the sun too dazzling?" He pointed at himself. "Or are you starstruck by my looks?" I wiped my tears, looked at Jason expectantly, and said one word: "Get lost." We had to cover the cost of our summer camp tickets ourselves, plus other expenses. It wasn't small change for a high schooler. But thankfully, with my writing gigs, I've saved up a decent amount, enough so I don't have to ask my mom or David. I calculated, and as long as I keep writing and do some odd jobs during breaks, I can cover my college tuition and living expenses. That way, I can become independent. While prepping for the summer camp with old test questions, a relative called to tell me my mom was pregnant. Upon hearing it, I was stunned for a moment but then calmly said, "Congratulations to her." In my past life, I tried countless times to save my mom's fate. But now, I've realized everyone has their own life path, and interfering with others' destinies will only backfire on me. I didn't contact my mom. On Sunday, Jason suddenly invited me to eat out. Are you planning to poison me, so you can move up a spot in the exams? I asked him. Come if you want, my treat either way. So, of course, I went. Jason's rich, can't let a free meal pass by. Midway through the meal, Jason slid over a box, for you. I was shocked. Jason, though it's normal to secretly crush on someone as talented and beautiful as me, proposing at our age is a bit early, don't you think? Jason rolled his eyes almost to the heavens. It's a birthday gift. That's when I finally realized, I was 17. In my past life, by this time, I was already dead. But in this life, with all my self-protective measures, I've survived past the point I was killed and started anew at age 17. The future, it should all be bright, right? I opened the box from Jason and found a bracelet made of yellow-brown stones. Are you sure this is a gift for a 17-year-old girl? I rubbed the stones, thinking it suited a middle-aged man more. Jason was used to my sass and said calmly, if you can't appreciate it, don't babble. It's tiger's eye, often used as a talisman or amulet. A talisman, an amulet. My heart was stirred, many questions weighed heavily inside me. How do you know my birthday? Why give me such a gift? What exactly is Soul Chaser? I didn't ask because I knew, though Jason seemed like a carefree playboy, if he didn't want to answer, I wouldn't get anything out of him. After the meal, I returned to the dorm with the gift. As soon as I walked in, my roommate said, Sarah, so today's your birthday. Happy birthday. You should have told us. We wouldn't have known if your mom hadn't come. I raised an eyebrow. My mom came? For some reason, an ominous feeling washed over me. Yeah, she brought you a cake. I looked at the small cream cake on my desk, my chest stirred with unexpected emotion. She remembered. 17 years ago today, she brought me into the world. So even after all this time and no contact, she still set aside our differences and came to school to give me a birthday cake. Have I been too harsh on her? She is my mom, after all. Though overwhelmed with thoughts, I noticed something amiss. My pillow, blanket, bookshelf, cabinet, all had been rifled through. I slowly moved over, with trembling hands, and lifted the pillow. Sure enough, the envelope with my camp expenses, $3,000, was gone. My storage box with my ID, payment vouchers, and bank card disappeared too. I stared at the small cake on the desk and suddenly felt it was remarkably ridiculous. My roommate, seeing me frozen there, got worried. The aunt said your place was messy, she tidied it for you, and we thought nothing of it. Did something happen? Yeah, under normal circumstances, who would think a mother would harm her own daughter? I was silent for a long time, finally whispering, it's fine. No one else is to blame but me. After David and Lucy's drama was a hit, I was swept by a wave of success, making me foolishly complacent that life's journey ahead would be smooth. I clenched my fists tightly as I walked out the door. Jason was playing basketball beneath our dorm when he saw my pale face and got startled. Sarah, did you see a ghost? I actually did see a ghost. Sometimes, people can be scarier than ghosts. I turned to Jason and forced a smile that looked worse than crying. No biggie, I said. I haven't been home in ages. Just thought I'd go back for a bit. It was that same familiar home. Maybe because I wasn't there cleaning, it was messier than I remembered. David was smoking amidst a pile of beer bottles, looking exhausted. Mom's belly was slightly swollen, her hair messy, and a bruise on her cheek. Even in summer, she wore long sleeves. She glanced at me, a bit guilty. Sarah, why were you back all of a sudden? Tears rolled down my face as I knelt. Mom, please, give it back. I'd saved that money for ages to join a summer camp. I needed it. When I get into college, I'll earn money and repay you. Mom looked troubled. Sarah, you know David's business isn't doing great. People keep coming by for debts. I'm pregnant with your brother, and we need money. Skipping that camp isn't a big deal, right? My tears were uncontrollable. I looked up at her. Mom, I'm begging one last time. Can you please return my money? She avoided my gaze. David got up in annoyance, kicked my shoulder, and sent me to the floor. You little brat, why are you crying? Ever heard of sins of the father? Your mom married me, so I'm your father. Your old man owes debts, and you have money? Have some heart. I walked out, tears streaming. The door slammed shut behind me. Once it was fully closed, I stopped crying instantly. I wiped my tears away, pulled out the tiger eye stone Jason gave me, and wore it on my wrist. Mom, David, you brought me up, and I'm grateful. That's why I gave you a final chance. But you both turned it down. Jason noticed I became elusive. Whenever he came to discuss interviewing questions, I was never in the dorm. Sometimes we'd bump into each other when I was just leaving or returning, always wearing a hat and mask. What are you up to? Jason asked, sounding concerned. Please, he said. I can lend you money for camp. Stop with the mystery trips. Whenever Jason hounded me about my mysterious outings, I'd shrug it off with a smile. I'm out secretly studying. He couldn't pry further, so he stopped asking. He always seemed to be at the bus stop whenever I returned. He'd walk me back on the dark road to school. The entrance exam was a week away, and then camp was starting. David announced he wouldn't let me go. He'd wait at the station, ready to break my legs if he saw me. Kind-hearted neighbors tried to reason with him. David, her getting into a top school would be great. Great, how? David yelled. She's already defying me, imagine after getting into college. She'd walk all over me. After his business downturn, David drank more. High-proof alcohol destroyed his brain, stripping away any dignity. I stayed silent but posted things only Mom and David could see on Twitter. I'd display pricey items, a branded backpack logo, a fancy restaurant corner, a rose gold bracelet. Some were photoshopped, some borrowed from a capitalist named Jason. But David didn't know. He just complained to Mom, asking if I had money again. Mom tried calling, but I'd already decided, no calls, no texts. I was untraceable to them. Friday night, I watched from the corner of the street as David stumbled out. It was his routine, get plastered at the local bar every Friday. Tonight, same story. In the dim bar, a mix of smells hung in the air. David ordered drinks on credit. Next to him, two tipsy customers were chatting. My sis has been drinking with a big boss lately, one said. No wonder she's been rolling in money. Got to be a lucrative night, huh? My sis is getting older, not earning big bucks. The real money comes from the young ones. My sis knows the 17-year-old who's top in the city. Those guys pay big bucks for a drink with her. 7,000 a night. Wow, she's raking in like $20K a month. His words weren't finished before one of the men was grabbed by David by the collar. The girl's name, is it Sarah? The man almost bit his tongue in fear. How would I know? David downed his whiskey, exhaling sharply through his nose. Who else but Sarah? He was hunted daily by debt collectors, while that little brat was making tens of thousands a month. Thinking this, David upturned his stool and stormed out amid gasps. He rushed home, dragging Mom off the couch mid-series binge, slapping her. You knew your daughter's making big money? In a daze, Mom replied, I gave you all the money I found from Sarah. That was like 2,000 or 3,000. She's making $20K a month now. David fumed. Come, we're finding your daughter to ask if any kid down her would act like her. David's anger fed Mom's own. If Sarah's raking in that much and not telling us? She immediately pulled out her phone to call Sarah. Sarah hadn't picked up the phone for ages, but this time, she answered just seconds after it started ringing. Her mom, though, was furious and didn't notice anything odd. She snapped, "Sarah, where are you?" The phone was filled with noisy chatter, and my voice came and went, "What? I can't hear you." Her mom was livid and leaned in with David to decipher the lively conversation on Sarah's end. A middle-aged man boisterously said, "Down this drink, and I'll pay you." I giggled, "All right, boss, 1 SEC, I'm on the phone, and I've got a girlfriend coming over, gotta go fetch her." Another guy chimed in, "No worries, just drink here, tell her Rose Hotel room 103, she can come on her own." I agreed, then spoke into the phone, "Don't call me anymore. From now on, we're done." With that, the line went dead. David was enraged, grabbing a nearby cleaver. Let's see if she's still willing to cut ties. With a knife in one hand and dragging my mom with the other, David stormed toward the Rose Hotel. The hotel wasn't far, only a few hundred meters from David's place. Ignoring the screams of the staff, David barged in and kicked open the door to room 103. Inside, it was indeed a full-on banquet scene. David's menacing gaze swept around, intending to drag me out. And then he froze. The room had no girls, just a bunch of middle-aged men, all around 40 to 50 years old. The man at the head of the table was short and stout, with an unremarkable face, but his presence was commanding. "David, what are you doing here?" David was stunned, sobering up halfway. Yes, the man at the head was a familiar face, the father of my former classmate, Leo. I'd shadowed Gary for a month, mapping out his movements, discovering he hosted dinners here every Friday night. "So, what are you doing here?" Gary's face darkened, leaving David stuttering, "I went to the wrong room." Gary glanced down at the cleaver in David's hand, "Wrong room, but with a knife?" Sweat poured from David's brow, "I was just looking for my daughter." Gary squinted his eyes, "So where is she?" Gary gestured around the room. "Tell me, where is she?" Sarah was in the Rose Hotel's backyard, hidden among dense trees, perfectly obscuring her presence. There was never any drinking with bosses. Those guys David ran into at the bar were hired extras Jason found for $200. The conversation Lucy overheard on the phone was pre-recorded. Getting David to crash Gary's dinner was the optimal solution I'd pieced together over the past month. Researching court records online, I found that Gary's company was in hot water lately, even tagged as high risk online. And during such a critical time, Gary wasn't at his company but whining and dining every night. Moreover, he'd previously troubled David, able to muster wave after wave of suspicious muscle. Naturally, it made me suspect Gary had mob ties. Whatever they discussed there was clearly about fixing his company, so David barging in with a knife was major trouble. Sure enough, Gary let David leave calmly. 3 days later, a scavenger found David in a warehouse at an abandoned factory, mute and bleeding, all fingers smashed, unable to even dial a phone. He was barely alive when found and rushed to the hospital. In the hospital, my mom got on her knees, crying. She couldn't afford the medical bills. "Sarah, please save your dad. You can figure something out." Many passing patients and medical staff looked over and whispered. "Get money yourself if you need it, why burden your daughter?" "Yeah, she's still in her high school uniform. What can she do?" Today, I had more patience than ever before. I gently patted my mom's hand, "I'll go check on David." "You're too upset, just wait for me outside." I entered the hospital room. David lay there, the man who stabbed me 3 times in a past life, looking weak as a fallen leaf. I crouched beside him and softly said, "David." Perhaps in a final burst of life before death, he opened his eyes moments later. He stared at me. I stared back. They stared at each other for a long, long time, until David finally grasped it. His eyes filled with limitless fear, his whole body trembled, muttering gibberish. He couldn't speak, but I understood him. I nodded slightly, it was all me. He struggled violently, while I looked down, watching him coldly like a dying fish thrashing with its final energy before suffocating. Slowly, David stopped moving. He lay there, wide-eyed on the bed, all life gone. I adjusted myself, then started screaming timely, running out crying, "David, he..." Medical staff rushed in, and my mom broke free from nurses to follow. Seeing David's corpse, she let out a sharp scream and fainted. She suffered a miscarriage. The staff rushed her for emergency care. It was chaos. A compassionate person draped a coat around me. "Child, go outside, don't face this." I thanked her, returned the coat, and walked out the hospital doors alone. The sun shone on my face, everything felt so unreal. In the distance, a familiar figure was waiting. Jason. He hadn't noticed me coming out, seemingly talking to something in front of him. But from my angle, there was clearly no one there. Thinking of what to reincarnate as? How about a cicada? Only living one summer, causing trouble for just a few months. Not bad. I waited in the shadows for a long time, until Jason settled down, then I approached him. Thinking I had just arrived, he coolly tucked his hands in his pockets. "Fancy meeting you here. Visiting a friend?" I said nothing, and after a while, tears suddenly fell down. Jason's hand immediately came out of his pocket, looking a bit flustered. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," I shook my head. "I just haven't eaten in 2 days, and seeing that place selling beef pies made me almost cry from craving." Jason bought 2 beef pies, one for each of us. I devoured mine, brushing the crumbs off my hands, finally ready to talk. "I actually just saw your friend," I said. Jason seemed distracted. "No way, you can't see him." I really couldn't see him, but I guessed. "You were just talking to David's spirit, right?" Jason froze. "And, after I was murdered in my past life, my soul remained." I looked into Jason's eyes and softly asked, "Was it because of you, soul hunter?" Jason bit into his beef pie, turned his head, and laughed. Later, I took the bus on time to attend summer camp and successfully got extra points for college entrance. With those 30 extra points, and my already good grades, I went to college like I always wanted after the entrance exams the following year. College life turned out more exciting than I imagined. I studied hard for my GPA, did internships, student jobs, and joined clubs to build up my resume. By the end of junior year, a senior I met at an academic forum appreciated me and asked if I'd join her company after graduation. It was a dream company for anyone in the field, with great pay and promising prospects, so I said yes instantly. Life seemed perfect. But the only thing missing was Jason. That day outside the hospital, he didn't answer me directly. Instead, he tried to throw the bag of beef pies into the trash with a fancy shot. Failing to show off, a gust of wind carried the bag away. For the sake of public cleanliness, I went to pick up the bag. When I finally got it and turned around, Jason was already gone. Just a few seconds, and he vanished into thin air. Later, I sent messages and tried calling the account named Soul Hunter, but got no response. I transferred back the money he lent me, but no one collected it, and it automatically returned to my account. When school started, I asked the teacher and found out Jason had transferred. Where? No idea. As I left the office, the teacher was still wondering. Everyone said Jason came from money, but no one ever saw his parents at school, not even when he left. This only witness to my 17th year breezed into my life and then floated away, leaving nothing behind. Afterward, my mother came looking for me again. She made a scene downstairs at my dorm, crying and shouting, saying she met a guru who told her it was all my fault. "Sarah, my biggest regret is having you." I cried my eyes out and kept apologizing. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. But I have a place of my own now. Why don't you go live there for now? I'll let you spend all the money I make." She was finally satisfied and got in the car with me. But after getting out, as she followed me, she realized something was wrong when 2 orderlies held her down. I admitted her to a controlled mental health facility. With 2 orderlies holding her, Sarah's mom lashed out, kicking and cursing me. Eventually, she ran out of strength, sobbing and begging me not to leave her there. I shook my head. No, you'll stay here for the rest of your life. Sarah, I'm your mom. How can you do this to me? I laughed coldly. Yeah, you're my mom. So you pretended to bring me cake while taking my hard-earned money from studying and writing to give to David. He didn't use it to pay off debts, just blew it on booze and lottery, gone in 2 weeks. When you heard your daughter might be working at a bar, your concern wasn't about how dangerous it was, but that she must be making good money not spent on family. Even without the blood debt from past lives' karma, you still don't deserve to be my mother in this life. I walked over and looked down at her. I used to try and forgive you, thinking since you're my mom, you must have some love for me. But I was disappointed. I had to accept that some people aren't fit to be parents, and you happen to be one of them. Sarah's mom looked at me, then suddenly broke down, crying and screaming, saying jumbled words. I didn't want to hear another word from her. After signing all the consent forms with the mental health facility, I turned and left. In my past life, she had also signed a forgiveness agreement for David. So I returned warmth with warmth and coldness with coldness. Time went by. I thought life would just keep going uneventfully. Then one sunny afternoon, heading back to the dorm, I saw a figure downstairs. All in black, tall and handsome, but laid back with his hands in his pockets. He stood under an osmanthus tree, his hair tousled by the breeze, answering my roommate's questions. So you're looking for Sarah? What's your relationship? Jason paused for a moment and smirked. She's my boss. A breeze came by, and as if feeling something, he turned to look at me. We stared at each other in the sunshine for a long time. He tilted his head and smiled. Long time no see, boss. Our first reunion after so long ended with Jason getting beat up by me for 40 minutes. You think you're the hero of a sad story? Disappear without telling me, huh? Have you lost your voice? Jason shielded his head, begging for mercy. I was wrong, I'm really wrong. Can you stop hitting my face? Especially when I'm so handsome, I could have charmed countless girls. Alright, I was really wrong. Tired of hitting him, we went to eat beef pies together. We had to handle some work. Our work is confidential, Jason said while eating. Am I your work too? I asked. Jason was quiet for a moment, then nodded, yes. Look me in the eye if you dare. Okay, I admit you're not. Jason rolled his eyes and said awkwardly, you're the exception. Mainly, your first life was pretty rough, and me, being the compassionate guy I am, Jason, just thought I'd help you out a bit. So, what do you think? Jason leans closer. Am I looking more handsome to you? I keep a straight face and say, get lost. I ask him, are you gonna leave suddenly again, like last time? He admits, well, gotta work, you know. But if you wanna see me, I can come by more often. He turns away. Oh wait, you don't want that. I give his shoulder a pat. What? I do want you to. Is there a need to smile that bright? The sunlight streams in, casting a golden glow on Jason's eyes and smile. Suddenly, I feel pretty good. Because looking ahead, we've got loads of good times waiting for us. So, how long do you plan on sticking around her this time? Jason is doodling in an empty classroom, while his friend sits behind the desk, playing games on his computer. Jason replies, we'll see. He scribbles a word on the paper. His friend just hit a bomb in Minesweeper, game over it is, and he can't help but throw the mouse, venting on Jason. The friend shrugs, weirdo. Jason laughs, aren't you too? The Minesweeper guy is long-haired, with sharp, almost otherworldly features. And yeah, he's actually kind of a supernatural being. After hearing Jason, he touches his chest, fair point. If a doctor checked this long-haired guy, they'd probably scream on the spot. Because he doesn't have a heartbeat. Hey, does Sarah know she's, like, a freak too? The man asks. Jason shakes his head, didn't tell her. She thinks it's all me right now. Sarah believes she survived and got another chance just because of Jason. But that's not true. Jason's a reaper, he can seal souls but can't rewind time to relive a life. The real reason time rewound? Sarah herself. Her immense unwillingness awakened her powers, though she hasn't realized it yet. Why not tell her? Hoping she'll be extra grateful? The long-haired guy sneers. Nah, she'll find out eventually. Better late than early. Otherwise, if she knew she could rewind time, she'd just slack off and memorize test answers, then roll back to before the exam. Jason, don't assume everyone is as shady as you. The long-haired guy jokes, so when you gonna let her in on it? Let me think it over, Jason starts to say, but the classroom door bursts open. No need to think. I heard it all. The long-haired guy looks at the petrified Jason and the just-barged-in Sarah, and after a long pause, he's grinning, crafty and anticipating. The Reaper and the Time Turner finally meet. Surely, there are way more interesting stories to come.